Hi there, Sukur participants. Scott Heron here again, bringing you the next video in our series. This is video number 8, where we're looking at the analysis timescale and the climate scenarios. In this video, we're going to build upon the information that we received from Dr. Itua's presentation and discussions around that, looking at the climate science information and looking at the climate stresses that we spoke about in our last video. Importantly here, you'll recall from Dr. Itua's presentation that there are different amounts of change can result in different future periods as we look forwards, as well as depending upon the pathway that we choose going forwards. In our CVI process, we look to nominate at the timescale that we're going to focus on for our analysis. And here we could look a decade from now, around the 2030s, mid-century, the 2050s, up to the 2070s, or towards the end of this century, 2100. And of course, different climate stresses may have different effects and on different points in that timeline. So some of the currently slower acting but accelerating climate stresses may be more apparent in 2100, even though they have a negligible effect right now and into the 2030s and 2050s. A decision was undertaken by the steering committee for the Sukur workshop that we would focus on the 2050s as our timescale for our analysis. So that means that when we're thinking about the potential impacts on the property and the community, we're focusing about 3 decades ahead from now. And so reflecting that, that's our time point that we'll look at with the climate science information to say, okay, 3 decades from now, what are the projections that we're going to use? In addition to that, you'll recall that there are different climate scenarios, pathways forwards that we can take and consider in the analysis. On the right-hand side of this table, you'll see various descriptions of pathways going forwards. On the left-hand side, they correspond with codes that are used by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the associated folks working in there. The term there, RCP, representative concentration pathway, is a reflection on, and the number associated with that is a reflection on the radiative forcing that's involved going forwards into the future. So 2.6 is a lower level radiative forcing, 4.5 is higher, 8.5 is higher again. You'll see also that there are a second set of numbers below, a second code. The SSP stands for the Shared Socioeconomic Pathway. And so this is combining the effects of the radiative forcing system, the physical system, with the social and economic choices that the global community makes through the course of that time. And so here, you'll note the similarity in each pair of codes. RCP 2.6 has an SSP 126. So the 2 and 6 are there again. And the number 1 reflects those choices made by the global community in terms of the socioeconomic elements. RCP 2.6, SSP 126, is likened to the idea of meeting the Paris Agreement, and that is that CO2 emissions would have peaked by last year, and that the future temperature, the future warming, will be kept within 2 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. The second of those climate scenarios is often referred to as a stabilization scenario. And so in this, CO2 emissions will peak around 2040, 20 years from now, and then they'll begin to decline. It's important to note that even during that period of decline, the temperature will continue to rise, but it will occur at a slowing rate. And it's also important to note in here that today's emissions have a lifetime of influence of around 25 to 30 years. So if we were to peak today, then we would still have a locked in effect of today's emissions for around 20 to 30 years. The lowest column there, the bottom row, sorry, is reflecting what's described often as a business as usual scenario, that emissions and temperature will both continue to rise through this century. And so that's the practices of technology and the practices of the world, the global community, are such that emissions and temperature continue to rise. The steering committee again made a decision in advance for the Sukur application, and the decision has been to select the RCP 8.5, SSP 585, that is often called the business as usual scenario. So now we're able to look back to the climate science information as compiled and shared by Dr. Atua, and look there at the timescale of around 2050, and looking also at the trajectory or the climate scenario given by RCP 8.5. And so when we're thinking about the effects, temperature changes, then we can look and say, what are the predictions? What are the projected temperatures for around the 2050 time frame using RCP 8.5 or SSP 585. And so that's the pathway that we want to choose for the application in this CVI workshop. And that's the end of this video.